Welcome back to the channel, guys, and today is a massive day for Star Wars fans. We have our first ever premiere episode of The Mandalorian on Disney+. We're going to go over kind of a brief synopsis of The Mandalorian, and then we're going to talk about our overall thoughts on the episode and the filmmaking, as again, this is a huge moment for Star Wars as well as Disney. It's the release of a first ever Star Wars live action TV show, to my knowledge. We got a ton of cool references to break down, an awesome cliffhanger. There are spoilers in this video for The Mandalorian.
100%.
So if you do not want this show spoiled, it's got an awesome twist in the end and kind of what has been pitched as a bigger Star Wars revelation and a spoiler. We figured out what that was in The Mandalorian show. So if you don't want to be spoiled, please click off now. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Anthony for the synopsis of the first episode of The Mandalorian.
So The Mandalorian opens up on a snowy planet. Not like Hoth, but the Mandalorian is collecting his first bounty. He delivers some amazing lines. He says, I could take you in warm, I could take you in cold. And as he captures his bounty, he gets escorted to his ship. And there's a giant monster in the ice, underneath the ice in the water. It's a great scene. He goes and brings his bounty to Carl Weathers' character. His name is Greef.
We discover a few things about the Mandalorian also in this
he has a
opening
distaste
sequence.
for droids.
Distaste for droids, which I speculate is actually because of a separatist attack on him during the Clone Wars, which we didn't actually get a look at any super battle droids or droid gunners in this episode.
Yeah, not yet.
But I think that we will as the series goes on. But again, I think that that's a cool little revelation for The Mandalorian. A lot of people have described this opening scene as sort of a Western feel, which I totally get. We also established that the Mandalorian's a very proficient fighter. We also get sort of a look at what the outer regions of the galaxy looks like at this point in time, especially it's really lawless. We also see that the Mandalorian uses carbon freezing to capture his bounties that I would say are less compelled to do exactly what he wants to do. So he'll just straight up carbon freeze them if they don't listen to him. He's silent as he moves about his ship. You get the impression that he knows his ship extremely well. He's very much down to business. He's not a talker.
I'm pretty sure that's what that line means when he says, I could take you in warm or I could take you in cold. I think it's not, I'm going to either bring you in dead or alive. I think it's like, I'm going to freeze you in the carbonite machine.
Right.
So he goes and brings his bounties to Greef. And what you learn there is, like, the galaxy is very much in disarray. There's not a whole lot of money around. Greef can only pay him in Imperial credits, which aren't really used anymore because the Empire is, falling apart. But he could offer another form of payment, but it would be half the amount.
Right, and we that is all because of, again, the time period that it takes place in. It's 5 years after the fall of the Empire and Return of the Jedi. So really, the Empire has only realistically been defeated by the New Republic for about 4 years. Because it took the Rebellion and the New Republic about a year to really stomp out what was left of the Empire for good. And that actually occurred on the planet of Jakku. But you get the impression that the Empire obviously is no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. When the Mandalorian, sorry to jump ahead a little bit, actually visits this brand new client, it's really interesting to see Imperials hiding out. And very much how it was for the Rebellion, it's not kind of switch sides, and the Empire is forced to kind of hide out, which I thought was an interesting little...
Yeah, it's really cool. And I love the way the Stormtroopers look in this series. How
they look dirty.
It's disgusting. Like, their suits are almost completely brown at this point.
Right.
So Greef tips off the Mandalorian to a new client that has a big job, but it's not a normal job. It's not one where there's a bounty puck, I think is what they call it, where there's a lot of information. There's an image of the person that you're going to find. So he sends him to this client, and the client says that he knows he's really expensive, and this is an important job. He says, I want him alive, but obviously you'll get half the amount of money if you bring him in dead. He's 50 years old or whatever. And he gets paid with Beskar, which is Mandalorian iron. And it's really cool because what you kind of discover in this moment is that's kind of his whole objective. He pays all of his money that he got from those bounties to take this Beskar and turn it into a shoulder plate for his armor, because he's trying to live up to the mantle of what the Mandalorians are supposed to be. And we'll, I'm sure, discover more about why he's pursuing that. But it's a cool moment. He goes to this like underground like Mandalorian,
almost in the sewers.
Yeah, it's really cool. And there's another Mandalorian, like a welder, and that Mandalorian is a woman. She makes him this shoulder plate and more completes his armor. Which is really interesting to see. I'm sure we're going to learn more about that in the future.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Even a few moments later with the blurg, you actually see that his wrist gauntlets get really damaged because it's not made of Mandalorian steel, which I think is really cool. I also think it's cool that in this scene with the female Mandalorian, they sort of reference a purge. I don't think it's the Jedi purge. The last we encountered the Mandalorians in Star Wars canon, there was an uprising led by Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels. And you kind of get the impression that it didn't go that well. With the Mandalorians hiding in the depths of the sewer. And I think that's an interesting way to take it. Because you kind of, once that's left in Star Wars Rebels, you kind of get the impression, oh, the Mandalorians are fine. But we never really discovered exactly what happened.
Yeah. And during the scene, too, when his new shoulder plate is being forged, every time there's a hammer strike on the shoulder plate, he's having these flashbacks of his childhood, and you're seeing kind of like he almost has PTSD about what I assume this Clone Wars era attack did to him in his life. And after this moment is when he goes out on this new bounty.
Right. I also want to say that they mention in the scene something called a findling. And I believe, again, that this is something to do with perhaps Mandalorians being scattered throughout the universe and they have to go find these Mandalorians. Or it could mean something else. It could mean that the Mandalorian is not a pure-blooded Mandalorian and that he was sort of this individual that was taken in by the Mandalorian culture after the Clone Wars occurred, and that he's taken up this culture, and that's why he's motivated by things like, oh, your people used to ride these creatures. I forget what they're called.
I can't remember, but it was some cool name.
It's like a dragon-like creature. I know what they are.
Yeah.
And it's cool for them to become canon again, because that's a big part of Mandalorians in the EU and Legends continuity. But you kind of get the impression that the Mandalorians are very much scattered, and that now they're either looking for them once they've been scattered, or they're looking for more potential Mandalorians. Because the Mandalorians, as a lot of people have pointed out, it's more of a way of life and a culture than it is actually a race of people.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue.
And so he goes out on this new bounty. He doesn't really know who he's looking for. All he has is a fob they describe it as, which is basically a tracker. It leads him to the location of the bounty. So he goes to this more desert-like planet. It looks similar to Tatooine. And he encounters this creature.
Blurgs.
He gets attacked by a blurg. The blurg almost rips his arm off. He tries to use his flamethrower to stop him. It doesn't work. And then this alien species, I believe his name is, what is it?
An Ugnaught?
That's the alien's name, but his name's, it's like
Kaliu? Something like that.
Voiced by Nick Nolte, helps him. He tells him that he's going to help him on his journey to capture his bounty. And what you discover is that this planet is a planet where people come to find peace, and there are some people here that are ruining that. And because he knows the stories of the Mandalorians, he assumes that, I think he says he'll make like
quick work of it.
Yeah. So
you also discover that there's been a ton of other mercenaries and bounties set to this location. And what you ultimately discover once he's led to this place by Nick Nolte's character on the back of a blurg, which I kind of want to talk about that scene again, harkening back to more Western movies. I think a lot of people have described that as kind of cheesy and formulaic, but I actually liked it. I like that it established that the Mandalorian is not this untouchable character that is just undefeatable and perfect at everything. You learn that he has to learn new skills, and you even see with his attack on the blurgs that while he's a very proficient fighter, and that's super clear, that he still has a ton to learn.
Yeah. And it's also a very fun scene in the show. But he learns how to ride the blurg, and he's escorted to where his bounty is. Nick Nolte's character rides with him and wishes him luck. He always has this line where he's like, what is it? I've said what I said. He has some repeating line, or I'm done speaking, something like that. And when he's there and he's investigating his bounty from a distance to make a plan, there's the IG-11 character who walks in and just starts wreaking havoc and making a mess out of everything.
Killing all the pirates,
completely ruining the element of surprise. So then the Mandalorian goes down to speak with IG-11 and try to make some sort of plan now that everything is kind of ruined a little bit. And that leads into one of the best shootout scenes I've seen in Star Wars and forever.
Yeah, I think that this shootout scene is superior to any shootout scene that we saw in Solo. It's really well done. I like that while IG-11 is extremely deadly, and I love the way he fights. I want to talk about for a second. He's kind of dual-wielding the blasters, moving around. We saw looks at IG-88 in The Empire Strikes Back, but again, he was always a character that was in the background.
Yeah, for sure.
And here you really get to see what these assassin droids are capable of, and why even in the Clone Wars it talks about why even Jedi are somewhat afraid of these assassin droids.
Yeah.
Because they're extremely proficient. It's a fun scene, but you also see, again, IG-11 lacks all subtlety. And I want to bring up that this is, again, voiced by Taika Waititi, who will also be directing the final episode of The Mandalorian. So it's really fun. IG-11, I think, is coming back, just to sort of jump ahead. But this action sequence is really, really fun. You get to see the ingenuity of the Mandalorian. Why, even though he doesn't hold the firepower that maybe IG-11 has, that he's clearly an intelligent fighter.
Yeah, he thinks through it.
That he's been doing this for quite some time, and despite being significantly outnumbered, it's really fun. I also like how whenever the Mandalorian is hit by blaster fire, it knocks him on his butt. It doesn't incapacitate him, but it knocks him over. I think that's a fun little detail. Again, that it shows you the Mandalorian can very much be defeated.
Yeah. And it's also another moment in the show where they reiterate to you the Mandalorian does not trust droids. And he has this kind of funny back and forth with IG-11. And ultimately, the way they win the battle is through the Mandalorian's ingenuity. He figures out a plan. They bring out this giant gunner, and the Mandalorian is able to spin the gunner around. That way he's not in the way of the fire, and takes it over and then kills every pirate in one
once he hops on the turret.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of fun stuff there with IG-11. There's this repeating self-destruct joke that they keep doing where in his programming he's not allowed to be captured. So in any attempt or any sort of time when he is going to be captured, when he's absolutely outnumbered, the bounty hunter droids will just destroy themselves. That way they can't be captured, which is fun. And the Mandalorian has to keep telling him, stop it, don't do that. We're going to shoot our way out of here, which is another great line. He says, we're going to shoot our way out. And they win the battle. They need to open a door, and they can't. So what they do is they take that giant gunner, and they just shoot every inch around the door to cut it out of the frame.
That was a great moment,
so awesome. And the way they end this episode is they find the bounty. It's this almost eggshell-looking contraption.
It's a cradle.
And there's a 50-year-old baby Yoda
I think they even say it's a century-old, actually. It's 100 years old. I believe there's a line in there, yeah.
Wow.
Because Yoda was 900 in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
So you kind of realize that you get a better look, even though you don't learn anything about Yoda's species, that they age really slowly, but even more than that, they mature very slowly. Because in Star Wars, I've always thought of Yoda, he's kind of a completely proficient adult and a fighter by 100 years old in Star Wars Legends. But here you really get the impression that no, 100-year-old baby Yoda, which is I guess what we have to call it, because
there's no name for the species.
Even in Legends continuity, it's just called Yoda's species.
Yeah, there's no information about them.
And that's actually, just to talk about that for a second, very much on purpose by George Lucas. George Lucas said Yoda doesn't talk about his species. He comes from a planet that we were not going to visit, and he's extremely force sensitive, but you kind of get the impression that Yoda's protecting his species from the sort of evils of the galaxy, and he refuses to divulge any information on his species, even to the Jedi Council.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. And here you can almost see that the Mandalorian reaches out to touch the baby, and the baby reaches out to touch the Mandalorian. I really like that scene. As far as speculation and why the Empire wants this baby, I think the Yoda species is probably inherently extremely Force sensitive and powerful in the Force. What these other beings might want to understand is how they can potentially defeat the Jedi, maybe Luke Skywalker, and this brand new threat. We're really unaware how much information these sort of remnants of the Empire have about Palpatine's defeat.
Yeah.
And what ultimately brought him down, or what even made him as powerful as he was. Perhaps that they do want to get this baby because they want to understand sort of the powers of the ethereal plane of Star Wars, and maybe they think it'll give them an upper hand. But it's really, really interesting. I do not think that the Mandalorian is going to deliver this bounty to the Empire once he discovers a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
Perhaps he will understand, like, maybe the Empire wants it to study the ways of the Force, or maybe even something worse than that. Maybe they could, like, turn it and they want to follow a new leader. Who knows? But I do think it's really interesting. As far as Star Wars canon, Yoda species, this is the third one. We've seen Yoda, Yaddle, which is the female version of Yoda, essentially. Also a Jedi and also Force sensitive. But who knows? I would venture a guess that this young member of Yoda's species is extremely Force sensitive, just like Yoda was. Again, Qui-Gon Jinn even says in The Phantom Menace that he's amazed that Anakin has a higher midichlorian count than Yoda, which means that Yoda's midichlorian count was significant on its own. Yeah. So this is a really interesting development. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's just going to be fun to see where they take this, because it's very unexplored territory. And I know there are a lot of people that are in the camp of, like, just kind of leave this alone. But generally for me, if I have an option to understand more or less about something, especially when there are people that claim that's like it's better to know less about something because you get to create the story in your head or something, I prefer to know more. It's similar to like the Joker movie. The Joker normally doesn't have an origin in a lot of stories. I prefer to know why people are who they are, and I think it'll be fun to explore this because it's something that hasn't been done yet in Star Wars, and it's also something that we're somewhat familiar with. So there's kind of like that through line of it's the story you kind of know, but we're going to tell you parts that you don't know. And I think that's going to be really exciting. And as far as just overall how this show has worked out so far, this episode is great. Like there's no, like, I don't want to underemphasize how good I thought the show was.
For real?
I think this is probably some of the best stuff we've gotten out of the new age of Star Wars. And it's just so much fun. There's tons of, like, you know, fun little references in there. There's a Life Day reference, which all the way back to the holiday special.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's really so entertaining. It's action packed. It's super fun. We finally got to watch that one man get sliced in half by the door that we've seen in all the trailers. It's just unabashed fun. I love it.
As far as budget goes, I do want to say this. You can't hold it to the same level of the films. I noticed the CGI was not quite as polished as like a Star Wars movie, but you kind of have to accept that.
But still, as far as like TV series go, I think it looks better than like Game of Thrones.
Wow. Okay.
Would you agree? Or do you think Game of Thrones is...
I think that the Mandalorian ship looks great. It's just like you could tell with the blurgs a little bit that they weren't quite as polished as they could be. And I noticed it the most in the droid speeder.
Yeah.
But other than that, I thought it looked great. And I also really respect that, at least to my eye, a lot of the like places that they visit in the Mandalorian are like built sets.
Yeah. Tons of
practical, which is really cool. And I couldn't really tell any CGI with IG-11. So overall, I'm really impressed. I think the story is really cool. And I thought that it was awesome that we got a big action sequence in the first episode. I hope that we get a major action sequence in every episode of The Mandalorian. And guys, we don't have to wait that long. Friday is the next episode. So overall, I would give this episode like an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's really entertaining. I want to learn more about The Mandalorian. I'm intrigued. The tone is a whole lot more fun than I thought it would be, actually. I thought it would be much more serious, but the back and forth between The Mandalorian and IG-11 is really fun. And I'm interested in a lot of the characters, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Absolutely.
Any closing thoughts?
I just can't wait for this Friday. It's great to know that every week we're basically going to get a new Star Wars movie. It's pretty fun. So 7 more episodes to go. We'll be reviewing all of them on here. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and if you guys had any little Easter eggs and breakdown that we missed, we'd love to hear what you guys thought in the comments down below of the episode. I also want to say that Disney Plus is really affordable. It's $7 a month, and you also get a free trial. So check it out if you're in the United States. If you're in the other countries, I don't know what to say. I know a lot of people have been asking where they can watch it, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out.
Is Disney Plus only in the United States right now?
I'm not exactly sure where, but I know in the UK people can't watch it yet, which is unfortunate.
That's interesting.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes of The Mandalorian and all things Star Wars news and breakdowns. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.